Israel is supported by many big international players, the US being the most powerful. Within Europe, it's Germany. Following the October the 7th attack by Hamas, Berlin's backing has been ironclad. So why is Germany such a staunch supporter of Israel? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Germany has been one of Israel's most reliable international allies. It has defended Israel legally and even supplied it with financial and military aid. But as the humanitarian crisis grows in Gaza, German citizens and some officials are now questioning Israel's methods. So, are cracks beginning to appear in that previously unwavering relationship?
In the days after the attack on October 7th, the message was unequivocal.
For Germany at the moment, the only place is at Israel's side.
This encapsulates Germany's Staatsräson, translated as reason of state, which intrinsically links Israel's security to German national interest. This is undeniably rooted in the Holocaust and the historical guilt that remains in the country. Last year, Germany provided 30% of Israel's military equipment, totaling $326 million. It provides the second largest level of funding, after the United States. Because of this military aid, Germany is facing a charge at the International Court of Justice that it is facilitating genocide and breaching the Genocide Convention, which it denies.
Occupation no more!
But as Israel's offensive against Hamas continues, with tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, opinion is shifting. On the streets, Germans condemn the mounting death toll.
There is a genocide happening right now, and Germany supports it, along with all EU countries and the United States. It's a catastrophe, and that's why I'm standing here, for humaneness, for humanity, and for justice.
The message from the top is also changing.
The longer the war lasts, the higher the number of civilian casualties rises, the more desperate the situation of the people in Gaza become, the more this begs the question, no matter how important the goal, can it justify such terribly high costs? Or are there other ways to achieve your goal?
The German government has reinstated its funding to the UN's Palestinian Relief Organization after what now appears to be unsubstantiated reports that some members had links to Hamas. It is also calling for Israel to show restraint, particularly in the southern Gazan city of Rafah, and for more aid to be allowed into the territory. But as Germany's, and to a greater extent America's appeals go ignored, is the German-Israeli alliance coming under strain? And what might that mean for both countries as the conflict drags on?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Sheffield in the UK is Benjamin Ziemann. He's Professor of Modern German History at the University of Sheffield. I'm delighted to say that here with us in the studio is Haim Bresheeth. He's an author, filmmaker and an academic at the School of Oriental and African Studies. And John Kampfner, journalist and Senior Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Haim, I'll come to you first of all. As a Jewish person, how does it leave you feeling knowing that Germany is so supportive of Israel, given the history of what they tried to do to the Jewish people not that long ago in history?
Ironically, of course, Germany has some long history of supporting different genocides. It's the only country that I know that affected two genocides in its history and two world wars. So they continue to support genocide. This is a terrible lesson of what has happened in the last 7 months. And Germany also decided that people like me are anti-Semitic because we support Palestine and Palestinian rights and we are against genocide. So to be against genocide now is anti-Semitic. This is incredible turn of events. And I think this should be worrying for all of us because Germany at the same time is also militarizing, is also involved in Ukraine, is also involved in a kind of the West against the rest kind of situation. And that they should support genocide and be experts on anti-Semitism is quite worrying. If you remember, 10 days ago, they have basically broken into a congress of anti-Zionists from all over Europe, took people out forcibly, some of them put on a plane and sent back to the UK, like the Glasgow University Vice Chancellor. So I think this is more reminiscent of the Gestapo than of a European democracy, for my mind.
Did you ever think in all your lifetime and your family's history and the terrible things that were done to your family in the 30s and 40s that you would reach such a stage that Germany would be involved in this?
I can't say that I'm surprised that Israel is doing genocide. I've been writing about it for 10 years, warning that this might happen. But when it actually started happening, it's really shocking beyond measure. I could not believe that Israel will do that. And even less could I believe that Germany will support Israel lock, stock, and barrel. Germany is the number 2 supplier of arms to Israel. Not just any arms. Germany has supplied Israel, or is in the process of supplying Israel, 6 nuclear submarines. And these are very special submarines. They are actually better than the ones the UK has. The UK has never got more than 2 working nuclear submarines, as you probably know. Israel has got 4 now working and 2 to come from Germany.
I want to bring John in. John, should a country be basing its foreign policy on a very dark chapter in its history from 80 years ago? Should
We share 2 things in common. One is my father fled Bratislava, then Czechoslovakia in 1939 after Hitler had gone into Prague, escaped, had to go all the way through Germany with his parents and out again to safety. How he survived, I will never know. And many of his secondary family were killed in the camps. I also completely acknowledge the points about Netanyahu and his government. I was doing some research on Viktor Orban in Hungary, and Orban and Netanyahu share the same far-right ideologue, paradoxically, a Jewish American from Brooklyn, who basically told them both to go after this nativist, angry, aggressive approach, which is now, sadly, commonly shared and practiced by all kinds of so-called strongman leaders around the world. So, and I absolutely abhor and condemn what Netanyahu has been doing in Gaza. However, I absolutely do not subscribe to this characterization of Germany. I think it's incredibly sad that Germany has panicked into this response to criticism of Israel, eliding any form of criticism of the actions of a far-right Israeli leader into anti-Semitism, is worrying, it's simplistic, it's dumb, and it's counterproductive. Because, as you say, there are a lot of Jews, not just in Germany. Look at what's happening at Columbia in New York. Look what's happening in American universities, to a lesser degree here as well. But I don't believe Germany, I think this, I bridle at this idea of, oh, Germany presides over 2 Holocausts. Well, yes, you can. It's an overused term. You can condemn, as I do, what Netanyahu has done in Gaza. But to somehow compare it to the highly planned murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust of the Nazi era, I'm afraid, I think, is lazy thinking. Germany is not doing this because of some desire to wipe out a people, some grand plan. They are doing this out of a chronic underconfidence and a fear factor. And for me, that's a sadness more than anything else. the hope that Germany had absorbed the lessons of the Nazi era, this term Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past and learning the lessons, and then channeling it into being a good but objective global citizen. Instead, Germany has panicked.
Let's bring in Benjamin. Would you agree with that, Benjamin?
First of all, I think it's not really helpful to talk about Germany in the collective singular, so as if it were one homogeneous entity. Germany is a pluralistic society, and once one can criticize the stance that the federal government has taken, actually the population in Germany stances in wider German society are much more diverse than has been acknowledged so far. We know from opinion polls, for instance, a few years back already, that there is widespread critique of Israel's policy with regard to the Palestinians, and there is a good, at least almost a third of the German population who, in a rather unhelpful historical comparison, think that what the Israelis are doing in Palestine could be compared or is almost as worse as what the Germans were doing in the Second World War. Germany is also, it should not be forgotten, a state where there's a rule of law. So Gestapo comparisons are not really helpful either, because whatever the police has been doing in Berlin lately with this Congress, this can obviously be subjected to revision in the court of law, as in every pluralistic and democratic society.
Benjamin, as the Gaza war continues and Israel continues killing people, men, women, children, 35,000 people plus dead now, do you get the sense that German public opinion may change towards support of Israel?
No, not in its majority. There are good historical reasons for Germany's long-standing historical commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, and we should not forget at this point in time that the very existence of the State of Israel has been threatened a number of times since its inauguration in 1948. So Germany has this long-standing commitment towards Israel, which should also be seen not only as a moral commitment that goes back to the legacy of the Holocaust and its importance for German identity. There's always been, in the 1950s under Chancellor Adenauer, in the 1980s under Chancellor Kohl, and also in the new millennium under Merkel, this has been embedded in a wider sort of vision of foreign policy commitments of Germany in the Near East. And we should not forget that Germany has been for many years the major contributor of payments, both bilaterally and within the EU, of payments to the Palestinian National Authority. So it's not that German policy towards the Near East conflict is entirely lopsided and only supporting Israel.
Well, let's take a look at a recent opinion poll carried out by the German broadcaster ZDF. It does appear to show support for Israel's actions in Gaza weakening. 69% of all those surveyed in that poll, that was in March, said they do not consider the war to be justified. Only 18% think the war is justified, and 13% said they don't know. I'll come back to you, Haim. I mean, Germany's even been dragged before the International Court of Justice because of all of this. How does that make you feel, seeing Germany effectively put on trial, even though the ICJ has rejected what was being levelled at the Germans? But all that global bad publicity for Germany off the back of its support for Israel, it's not surprising, is it?
I think it's a good thing that Nicaragua did to expose, the supplies and the support of Germany for Israel in the way that it did at the ICJ. I'm sorry the ICJ has taken what seems to be a hurried decision not to support Nicaragua. I don't know, it's only came out, I don't know on what basis this was decided. But I think and by the way, I haven't, I think you misunderstood me, John. I haven't suggested that there is either similarity or even a relationship between the Holocaust and the genocide. What the ICJ is doing is looking at the accusation of South Africa that genocide is being conducted in Gaza. And, as someone who is working in the area, I know for a fact, and 150 of us, academics in the area of genocide studies, said this is genocide, this is a textbook case of genocide, by looking at the Genocide Convention and checking the 5 criteria, and Israel meets 4 of them. So I don't think there is any doubt, but of course they will take a very long time, much longer than they did in the case of Germany, to see the accusations against Israel as justified or otherwise. I'm sure they will have to find that the accusations are justified. Now, when it comes to Germany, I think Germany should be, much more sensitive to the public opinion in the West, because Germany is the main country now in Europe that has a very strong neo-Nazi rising party. I cannot forget that, because both my parents were the sole survivors of their families. All the family, apart from both my parents, were decimated in the Holocaust, as were, not just other Jews, but also 5.5 million Russians. So the fact that Germany is at the same time leading a campaign against Russia in a way that is very worrying in the last week, I find, highly
John, you're shaking your head, John.
I'm afraid you're conflating willfully all kinds of separate issues. On the ICJ, Nicaragua had every right to do what it did, as did South Africa. However, there is an egregious hypocrisy in Nicaragua, of all countries, whose president stands accused of raping a family member, the most horrific human rights abuses. I think all countries should look inwards at themselves, at their own records of rule of law, including our own.
Back to you, Benjamin. I saw Germany has recently started paying money and donating again to UNRWA, having stopped after October the 7th. What kind of a message did that send when Germany stopped those payments? Because that money was badly needed.
I'm not so much interested actually in individual decisions in the current conflict. I would like to take a broader view. And one thing that I worry about is the way in which genocide, which is both a political and a historical and analytical, also judicial term, is bandied about in public discourse. It might well be the case that some Holocaust or genocide scholars in a highly politicized, at this point, field of academic study think it's a good idea to charge Israel with committing a genocide in the Gaza Strip. But what is the core criterion for a genocide according to the UN Convention? Also the one that makes most sense when we look at the history of genocide, it's the deliberate attempt to destroy in whole or in parts an ethnic, religious or other type of community. And accusing Israel at this point of committing a genocide is lacking on evidence precisely on that point, the deliberate intent.
But so Israel has been accused, though, Benjamin. Israel stands accused by South Africa of a genocide in Gaza. And by the 5 criteria, as we've just heard our friend Haim say, Israel ticks 4 of those 5 boxes.
I'm not so sure about this. How would they want to prove deliberate intent on behalf of the Israeli government and the military authorities, the IDF at this point? This will take time through a process. I can see why people are agitated by the human suffering in the Gaza Strip. But and obviously it's the right of every sovereign state to lodge judicial complaints at international courts. But I think in a historical and political perspective, using the term in this context is not really helping.
It's also, if I may come in here, when Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, was in Israel only recently, and she saw Netanyahu and others. In a typical act of sort of bullying and playing with history or exploiting history, Netanyahu was sort of finger wagging at the Germans and saying, well, you know, look at you and look at your record. And the challenge for all countries and the challenge for all of us here, in my view, is to look at Israel objectively. In other words, Israel should be treated no better and no worse than any other country. It should be held up to the same standards. There is no Israeli exceptionalism. It must abide by the same rules as everybody else. And Germany, more than anyone else, needs to do that. By saying that, I would never say Germany needs to draw a line under the Holocaust, draw a line under the war, forget all about it. It didn't. Of course, I'm not saying that. But Germany has already had, getting on for 80 years, to work this through, to absorb it into its system, to grow as a post-war country. It is not recent. 80 years is a long time in any historical analysis, particularly in this very fast-changing era that we all live in now. And Germany particularly needs to treat Israel like everybody else should treat Israel, objectively. In other words, it needs to somehow put some smart distance between its history and its approach to Israel.
But we're not seeing that, though, are we?
And the great sadness for me is that since October the 7th, which, don't forget, that line that is repeated again and again in Germany, which is that on that particular day was the largest killing of Jews anywhere since 1945. My goodness, that resonates. I'm in Germany half the time. It resonates very, very much. And Germany has overcompensated. It has gone on to, as I said earlier, this panic-laden, fear-stricken approach, instead of being able calmly, objectively, to look at Netanyahu, look at the way he is, which is no better and no worse than some of these other strongmen, authoritarian leaders around the world.
Haim, decision-making out of panic and out of guilt is never good.
Of course, but we heard arguments that Israel should not be treated exceptionally. Yet Israel is treated exceptionally since 1948, both by Germany and by the United States and by the UK, where we are sitting and discussing it. There is no other country that in its 76 years of history has been treated exceptionally. That means that when this is discussed at the UN, and that's not happening every week, but when it is discussed at the UN, Israel can be sure that the US will actually veto anything that it doesn't accept. That is exceptionalism. Israel is now continuing to do the killing after the ICJ has warned it in a very clear manner, and they have totally disregarded the ICJ warnings. Now, you may think that it's not right to call this genocide. Genocide scholars actually believe, and I don't think this is political, Jonathan. I'm an Israeli Jew. You think this is easy for me to actually call this genocide? You think that I enjoy the Jews are conducting genocide?
We'll give
and let's
Benjamin
not
the
compare
final
it
word.
to the Holocaust.
We'll give Benjamin the final word on that. Benjamin, can you see Germany's support of Israel changing anytime soon?
Yes and no. I think the German position is, there is pressure in public opinion and civil society on the German government. And I think we also have to see this in a wider perspective. And I thought, even though, Germany's position towards the Ukraine war is very clear, this is part of a wider reconsideration of the German position in international politics, which is, the Second World War was now 80 years ago, but it's only been over the last 10, 15, 20 years that Germany has to rethink its approach to foreign policy and its position as a major power in Europe. It has always been noted that there is a mismatch between German economic might and its influence and impact and its limited capability to develop strategic decisions and to play its own role in fostering sort of international relations. Coming back to your point and your question, I think the general support of German foreign policy, the government that is towards Israel, will be unwavering in the future. That has been ever since 1952, when Adenauer negotiated reparation payments in the Luxembourg Agreement, been a cornerstone of German foreign policy. But in detail, I think there is definitely scope for change, not least because Germany is a democratic country, and when the public opinion is criticizing the government, it will at some point have to start noticing that.
Benjamin, Haim and John, thank you all so much for your insight. Quite a sobering debate. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for me, Enda Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.